We may not be in front of a campfire, but I'm still going to talk about ghost stories. The 2018 movie. Next on the Bloody Breakdown. Let's get creepy. Okay, so be sure if you want to get into some spoilers and things about the movie that isn't necessarily spoiler free, make sure to stay around and stick around to the end because I'm going to be getting into that. To really kind of talk about some of the themes and things that went on that I feel like I have to kind of reveal some stuff that you may not want to know about if you haven't seen the movie yet. But for the first half of this is going to be completely spoiler free. Okay, so Ghost Stories is a film that was co-directed by Andy Nyman and Jeremy Dyson, who also wrote the stage play that this movie, Ghost Stories, is based off of or adapted from. And the plot of the movie basically deals with the Professor Goodman, who is also played by Andy Nyman. And Goodman was a character who grew up in a strict Jewish religious household, and he grows up, I guess because of this, because of those issues that he had with his dad and things of that nature, he grows up to be someone who does not, who is very questioning of religion, of spirituality, of all things supernatural. So he's a professor, but he's also someone who runs a popular TV show where he basically debunks supernatural theories and fake psychics and things like that. So that's his whole MO. And what happens in the film is that he receives a package from someone who he really admires, who was also someone from like the 1970s who also did the same thing in debunking supernatural occurrences and religion and things of that nature. And the package contains 3 cases that the previous person, his idol, was never able to solve. And so Professor Goodman is basically, Philip Goodman is basically charged with he charges himself with trying to find out if these 3 ghost stories are real or not. So that pretty much, that's the simplicity of this movie, at least on the surface. Overall, I like this film, okay? So that's just, I have some bias. I am someone who, I'm not into really gory horror. I am not someone who likes necessarily, exploding bodies and, blood and guts. Zombie creature features aren't really usually my thing because of that factor, because it's usually the scary thing is the zombies biting people and all types of gross factor. I'm more so someone who I do tend to like horror pictures that are good old-fashioned ghost stories. There's something going bump in the night. There's something in the darkness. What is that? There's a mystery going on. I really like those. That's probably like my second fave kind of horror, subgenre of horror, along with like really so bad they're good B horror movies. So I was really interested in this film and how they were going to do it, because I was really hoping that this would be maybe an anthology of some really good old-fashioned ghost stories, supernatural, what was that went bump in the night kind of stories. And they did not disappoint. It actually very much was a film like that, where each of the stories drew you in. It was a really cool mystery surrounding each of the tales, and how it all tied together in the movie itself, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the video. And it was just, it was really good old-fashioned ghost stories. Like, honestly, I could imagine someone telling these stories like around a campfire. So some of the pros of the film, I really enjoyed the simplicity of this movie. It was not, showy. I mean, I think I've said it before, where some of the best horror is intimacy. Some of the best horror films are very intimate. It's very contained in the sense of there's not a lot of characters. There's not a huge kind of set and world building sort of thing going on. It's just very much a good old A, B, C kind of plot line. And this movie stuck with that. Like I just described, the plot was so simple and it stuck with that, and I think it really worked for this film to keep it very simple, to set the tone with the characters who, our main character, and then the rest of the characters that kind of played into his journey. The atmosphere was another great thing about this. It really set the tone. Like this idea of with the opening with who Professor Goodman is and how he came about trying to, you know, be on this crusade to, you know, just debunk all things supernatural and religious and things of that nature. It was told in a very straightforward way. We didn't dwell on it too much, and we kind of got to go into the crux of the movie. And it just basically, you know, I mean, you already knew what you were getting yourself into. It's ghost stories, but it wasn't like, you know, oh, it's ghost stories, but this is such a jarring movie where I can't really sit down and be ready to be told a nice, you know, creepy story. So it was very good, the creep factor of this film. So the atmosphere was quality. Another great thing was the acting. Like I said, Andy Nyman, who co-wrote the stage play, also plays the main character, the professor, and he does a very believable job in the sense of kind of drawing you in and, you know, what he's about. He's not like a total jerk, which can be hard sometimes if the main focus is on this character and you kind of really don't like him necessarily, which, you know, you can fall into that trope, right? Like, I don't believe in anything. I want to dispel everyone's hope that there's an afterlife and blah, blah, blah. But he did it in such a way where it wasn't like, oh, screw this guy, I hope he gets his just desserts, you know. It was more like, okay, I kind of see where he's coming from, why he got to this point, but I also see, you know, his stubbornness when it comes to these, to his journey that he's going on. So it was good acting on that. Also, one of the co-actors in this film is Martin Freeman. You know, who is really awesome in like everything he does. He has such a subtle way about him that's just, he's very dynamic. No one was really obnoxious, not even the main character, which is a plus. You do not like for your main character to be so obnoxious that you want them to die within the first 15 minutes. The scares, I mean, you're talking about a ghost story, so you kind of have to talk about the scares, right? I mean, and this is what I'm talking about with the whole idea that some people, you know, when you talk about ghost stories and things of that nature, you know, we're so desensitized in this, you know, society, in our world. Not that I'm getting on a soapbox or anything, but we are kind of desensitized where sometimes we need, you know, a lot of audiences for them to really feel scared. They need something jarring, like someone's eyes getting gouged out, or, you know, just really like, you know, blood, gore, like popping chest and things of that nature, to the point where like some subtle, you know, creep factor, there's something in the background, you don't really know what that is, things of that nature, doesn't really get people going. Now for myself, like I said, I'm slightly biased and I do like ghost tales to the point where I can let myself get into them enough where I will jump and I will feel creeped out from the film. And some people aren't like that. So for me, it was a pro. I thought the scares landed. I thought all the scares and the jumps landed. Even the really tropey jumps where it's like, yeah, you know something's about to jump out. But they did it in such a way where it was still like, okay, I'm still creeped out by this. So I thought the scares worked. So that was a pro for me. I wasn't sitting there like, oh, this is a good story, but I'm not scared at all. Like, no, I wasn't like a horror snob. I actually really dug the old school way that they were really trying to creep you out when it came to this film. Now, not all films are perfect, of course. I've said it before. Clueless is probably the only perfect film. You know, you can fight me on that. I don't care. But when it came to the film, some of the cons, and honestly, there were probably only 2 cons that I really had. And one of them is not really a con, just kind of me being who I am when I watch a film. One was the mysteries. Like, certain things weren't totally explained. We don't need to know that all the time, because sometimes when the mystery is taken away, it does take away the fear, because one of the things we fear is the unknown, right? That's deep. So when everything is known, where's the fear? And then suddenly it's not so scary anymore. So in my opinion, I don't mind that certain things were left, obviously, purposefully not explained. Now, in certain cases in the film, there were some things where I was like, okay, I think they just forgot about that. Like, I think they threw that in and they just kind of forgot to explain it later. So this is why it's kind of a half con, because partly I got that some of the mystery needed to stay to keep the fear, and then the other half was like, okay, y'all just didn't tie that up. The second con con number 2 for me. And once again, this is a little biased for me because, like I said, this was just, overall, this was a quality film. So I'm not one to always try to find something negative about a film. I mean, if there's nothing really giantly negative, then, you know, there's no point in talking about it. But I will say, and maybe this was also purposeful, that this is a very male-heavy film, right? Like, if you've seen the movie posters and things like that, the main characters are all men. Even in the ghost stories, the main characters are men in the ghost stories. And so that leaves it so that there's kind of a lack of women characters. You know, there's kind of a lack of female voices in this story, which, I don't know, I think it worked. I mean, I think it could have went in either way. I think you could have added women. It wouldn't have detracted from what maybe the theme he was going for or they were going for the film. But I also thought it was kind of glaring after a bit. I was like, yeah, the women don't really have voices. And I do have a theory for why that is. And I can talk about that in the spoiler area. I have a theory for why the women weren't as a vocal part. Like, there were women in the film. They just weren't very vocal. Or you couldn't see their faces or things of that nature. So I think I have a reasoning why that is. But if I didn't have that theory and I was just someone that kind of looked at the surface of it, I would say, you know, it lacked that woman factor, which kind of, you know, sucked a little bit. So, should you give ghost stories a stab? You should totally give ghost stories a stab. I believe it's Midnight IFC, Independent Film Channel, that's distributing or part of this film, and they did a really great job. I mean, you know, there's something of a deeper tone to this film, and I think it's just a quality, good story that the stories themselves will probably stay with you after you leave the theater. Like, you will leave the theater still thinking about the stories in this movie. So I think if it's a movie that resonates and it does its job in scaring you and creeping you out and it still resonates, then it's definitely something you should give a stab to. So it is definitely stab approved. So that's a spoiler-free review of the movie thus far. Once again, stick around if you want to kind of talk about some of the more spoilery aspects of the film to kind of dig deeper into that. But if not, let me know what you think down below. If you saw the film and you have some comments, or if you haven't saw the film and you have some other ghost stories that you think I should really check out, be sure to comment down below and let me know. And also be sure to subscribe so that you are one of the first to know when I post a new review. Thanks for watching. So, spoilers. So my theory for why the women voices, like, there were moments when the mother in the second story was faceless. You didn't see the mother's face. The daughter, or the little girl ghost in the first one, you didn't see her face. And then in the third story, there was a thing where the pregnant wife was just kind of talked about, and then you saw her in kind of ghostly form, but she didn't say anything either, right? Except like a little, you know, like the creep factor, you know, we're all doomed kind of deal. None of the women had real voices in this film. And I think my theory for that deals with the fact that the professor is like lonely and single, and he also had a very strict father, to the point where he had to deal with the fact that his sister, who we also see in the beginning of the film before she got kicked out for, you know, dating an Asian man or a man of color, we don't hear her voice either. We just see her in flashbacks kind of arguing with their dad and stuff. And I think maybe given that this film, all of it takes place in the professor's subconscious, right? All of this takes place because he's in a coma and he is imagining this whole thing of these 3 ghost stories, because it's not really ghost stories. I mean, they're ghost stories. Maybe they were cases, but really we're in his psyche, right? And so I'm thinking maybe that plays into the idea that the women in his life through his father and whatnot weren't allowed to have a voice, and also because he was single and didn't have a woman like figure in his life playing a significant role. So I think when it came down to his subconscious, that was also still the same thing. Like, his parents you know, the woman had no face, the women didn't talk, because in his subconscious, in his life thus far, the men were the ones that led. And I think that was reflected in his psyche, that it was so male heavy. Also probably because the three characters were in his subconscious and also in his real world in the hospital room were also men. Although, like I said, they could have made it so that there were, like, it was a woman doctor or a woman orderly or something, and they didn't do that. But that's my theory, because I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that it wasn't just some idea that they just didn't care to have women lead characters, that it was actually playing into the idea of this guy's upbringing, of dealing with the fact that women were often seen and not heard in his upbringing. So that was my theory for that. Like, you know, that twist at the end, like, that's how you know it's a good story, a good ghost stories. Ghost stories, supernatural stories are supposed to have a nice twist at the end. Either, like, you know, like The Sixth Sense, right? Like, all that time he was, the therapist was dead, and things of that nature. When you tell the ghost story, like, he was under the bed the whole time. So the fact that this whole thing was taking place in the main character's head, because he had attempted suicide, was so awesome. It was like, yes, like, that's the twist, you know, like, there's something weird going on here, and that creeped me out even more. Like, honestly, I was creeped out by the three ghost stories, but I was seriously creeped out when the twist happened, when it was like, okay, what is happening here? Is this guy in hell or something? And Martin Freeman did such a good job, like, twisting it around, and suddenly he's the guy in the subconscious and stuff. It just really worked. It was such a nice twist, and I just thought, man, that's well written right there, because I wasn't expecting that. I did not think that was what was happening. I knew something was going on, because they kind of, you know, interwove that throughout, that there was something else playing and going on there. But when it actually happened, I was like, that is not what I would have guessed. And when a movie can surprise you in that way, it's good. So I really liked that aspect, and I thought it was a cool twist, this idea of this character who had been dealing with religion and debunking religion and supernatural stuff had to also get to a point where he did try to commit suicide, and he is questioning if there's an afterlife. And maybe in a way, like his psyche tried to reveal, he does want there to be afterlife, because, man, if this is all there is, then that's pretty depressing, right? So I thought that was, it's always nice when a horror picture goes a little bit deeper and still creeps you out, which I thought this film did a really good job of. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about those aspects of the movie that were very spoilery, especially that big twist at the end that he was actually in a coma the whole time. So, did you see Ghost Stories yet? And if you have seen it by the time you see this video, comment down below and let me know what you thought about the twists and turns and the ghost stories and the fact that the women had no voices, and what your theory is on that. Comment down below and let me know. And also be sure to subscribe so that you are one of the first to know when I post my new videos. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy together.